Welcome to this week's edition of Dugout Dish Podcast. I'm Andy Kiriakides, joined by my wonderful co-host, Keith Glasser. Keith, how we doing?
Great. How are you?
We got another wonderful guest, somebody I know you're good friends with, and we've certainly crossed paths with. So I'm going to kick it over to you to give the intro here.
Sure. Tonight we have probably never listened, but a wonderful human being, a wonderful baseball coach. I've known for a very long time. You and I played against him when we were in college. I don't think he was there early enough to recruit us at Lemoyne, but who knows if he even would have liked us. But we're currently joined tonight by the head coach of the Oswego Lakers and I believe the Bourne Braves, two-time defending champions of the Cape Cod League, Scott Lander. Scott, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me, guys. Appreciate it.
If you could, before we kick this off, just give the listeners a quick rundown of how you have ended up at Oswego.
Oh, man. I would like to, first thank, there's a lot of people, in my circle that got me to where I am today. I started as a player at Cortland, under the direction of Steve Owens when he was there. And then, and Joe Brown, who's currently the head coach at Cortland. So he was the assistant. I had the privilege to play for those guys all 4 years. I went to 3 World Series as a player. And then once I got done in 99, Steve went to Lemoyne. So it gave me the ability, Joe got the head job and gave me the ability to start coaching right away, so he got me started in it and I couldn't thank him more. I was there for a year and then I went to junior college. I went at 24. I was at Vroom Community College, went to, my first year at Cortland, we went to the World Series as an assistant. Then I went to Broome Community College for a year. That was a little different baseball than I was accustomed to. We went to the regionals that year, and then I had about enough of the junior college scene. So I went back at 24, and I didn't get paid much. So I went back to Cortland for another year with Joe. Went to another World Series, and then I went on. I figured, I was done being poor. So I went and got a teaching job and went to Lemoyne with Steve for the next 9 years. Obviously, that's where you guys were playing for Marist, the battles in the MAC. And then when Lemoyne got kicked out of Division I and was going Division II, Steve went to Bryant. And basically I stayed one more year and I ended up at Oswego. So that's where I've been for the last 13 years. Steve's been very, instrumental, a huge mentor to me throughout my career. Now he's at Rutgers. I talk to him just about every day, but, those two guys really got me started in my profession. Jamie Shevchik, who's at Keystone College, got me started in the Cape with Brewster in 2019. So I was out there with Brewster for 2 years. 21, we won it when I was there. And then I got the luxury of going over to Bourne for the last 2 years as the head coach. And we won it the last 2 years. So it's been a good ride in college baseball, for myself. But with a lot of help along the way.
Yeah, I think that's the one thing that everyone, at least we have a decent amount of coaches who listen to this too. Some we know, some we don't. But that kind of, we try to illustrate from a coaching standpoint just as much as we do the recruiting side of like how one interconnected this is, but how, it takes a decent amount of time to kind of get to where it is you want to be. Even if it's, you've been at us and, the accolades can speak for themselves. Like you've been to what, two World Series?
2 World Series, 17 and 18. We were in regionals from 15 till last year. So a couple super regionals. So It's been a good ride.
It's really good baseball. The one thing, and we'll talk about this tonight too, but we always try to kind of hammer home the point of the Division III model is not necessarily 13th grade baseball of like I can just walk on and play some baseball in the SUNY at some of these schools or really at high levels of Division III. It's really good baseball. But the first question we always ask everyone is just, how do you go about identifying players that you recruit at Oswego?
It's a little different for me now that I'm in the Cape a majority of the summer. So it's a little tougher. My assistants will go out, but I have a lot of connections. I think the one good thing about Division III compared to Division I and II is you're not penalized for being wrong too many times. The unlimited roster in Division I's got 40. I don't even know what 2 has. But we can have as many as we want. So if you miss on a guy, it's whatever. You have time to. We'll take Keith Glasser for example. Like, okay, you're not ready to play as a freshman and sophomore, but I have the ability. I see the potential in you. We get to work with that guy for 2 years before he is ready to play. At Division I and Division II, you don't necessarily, or at least Division I, you don't have that luxury if you got a lot of money into them. So I think that's a bonus. But in terms of identifying players, Oswego is very, very tough place when it comes to outdoor sports. Everybody, it snows there. It's a public school. It's a very good academic school for the public system. But we get 125 inches on average of snow a year. And we don't have turf. So it's a tough sell at times, so we have to really, I feel like if I'm interested in a guy and he's going to come to Oswego, especially over some of the opponents that I'm going against, I feel like they're going to be tough. I really do. So that's the biggest thing when I start to navigate through it and who's going to fit into our culture. But I think truthfully, I've really succeeded on taking a raw athlete, maybe from a smaller school or kind of hidden a little bit, but really, really athletic, and kind of grooming him or molding him into a baseball player that potentially can be. I was talking the other day to a coach, and I think that's where you have to start, especially at the Division III level, because and you hit it on the nose. Division III is really good baseball. We've had 4 guys transfer Division I in the last 2 years because of the portal at high levels. And I think, for us this year, there's another 3 or 4 guys that could jump into the portal and be Division I guys. They're across the board for us. They weren't necessarily there at the beginning, as a freshman. They were too small, or they weren't fast enough, or, they're lateral. It just for multiple reasons. And now they're at that point. But, when somebody thinks they're going to come in and play for our team right away, a lot of times that's a false reality. It's tough, and the older guys have been through it. So I think the first thing we do is, okay, is this kid tough? Will he work? And is he athletic to where we can really mold him into what we want? Because if you go the other way and you say, okay, Andy's he's a really good baseball player, but he's average speed, average power, he's not going to grow. You're already kind of plateaued. So do all the athletes work out? No, they do not. But there's such a big, ceiling for them to where, okay, if they do pan out, we got a really, really special player. You might lose them in today's world, but that's where I think I start. And then once we get them on campus, it's like, who fits into our program? Is this a public school, private school? Is he tough? Is he going to fold? I would say I'm not really hard on him, but I put a lot of pressure on these guys, so they have to be able to deal with it and know that, I'm on their side 100%, but I'm just trying to make them, a better person, and, using baseball as a platform, a better person, but also a better play.
Yeah, I think two things that you hit on. One, Carl, for those of you that don't know, that Carl Steffen is a legend at RPI for 34 years.
The stuff man's listening tonight.
when I got into Division III, I played Division I, I coached 1 and 2 before that, and I got into Division III. It was a little different for me, but I was immediately kind of surprised at how good the older guys were. And Carl's big thing was always we recruit guys that are by the time they're juniors and seniors, the goal is that they are guys that now in today's world can transfer and go to a Division I school. But kind of are that really good college baseball player at the Division III level. And that was kind of the goal. And I think the other thing that you hit on too, and it's actually probably a teaser for this week's podcast that no one's going to hear until after. But Matt Hobbs last week was on talking about how being able to embrace the struggle at the college baseball level for younger kids is huge. You can't just skip the struggle and become really, really good in college baseball. At some point you are going to struggle, and how you respond to that and work through that, will kind of define how good, or how high your ceiling is going to be. And I think that that's true. And he talked about multiple levels. It's the same thing. It's the same thing at the Division III level as it is at the Division I level. You're going to struggle at stuff, and how you work through that and respond is really, what's going to, ultimately determine how good your experience / career is going to be.
Yeah. And I think other than strength and speed, because once you jump from high school, the strength and the speed are the biggest thing. I mean, plain and simple, the game's faster, doesn't matter, Division III, Division II, Division I, but also just the physicality of these guys. You walk in the weight room in September and you can identify our freshmen compared to the older guys 100%. And how quickly do they bridge that gap is a big thing. But the other thing I think is huge is the ability to handle failure. And you're talking about, and the difficulties, because a lot of times these kids haven't really ever struggled. And they've always been one of the best players, and now they're there, and there's 2 guys ahead of them that are juniors and seniors, and it's what do I do? I think that's the biggest thing, is how do they deal with the everyday struggles of school? But in baseball specifically, it's just the mental grind of how they can deal with that failure. And I don't think they do well at times with that, especially this generation. And I'm not knocking this generation, because I think, my generation as adults, I think we've kind of, with a lot of other things, but I think we've created it.
These kids have grown up in different worlds. Me and Keith talk about it all the time. There's a million different travel teams out there now. 15 years ago, 20 years ago, if you played on a travel team, you were automatically good because there wasn't that many.
Mm-hmm.
It's a different environment. There's a ton of tournaments, and it's become, for better or for worse, but it's become a situation where a lot of kids are playing for themselves. And then you get to college and it's oh, I need to be a part of a team. I'd be curious to get your thoughts on that, because you've coached at all different levels and you've won at all different levels. Those Lemoyne teams were freaking awesome. You're coaching the best of the best of the best out at the Cape, but when you get to college, I think that gets lost in the conversation sometimes, is that you're no longer a player on a team, or you're no longer a player who's trying to get recruited. You're on a team that's trying to win. And like for you guys, it's NCAA tournament, super regional, World Series, national title. Like you have those kind of aspirations. Mm-hmm. How do you handle that as a coach in terms of getting a kid to wrap his head around like, hey man, you're here for something that's bigger than you. This isn't about getting recruited anymore. This is about winning.
Yeah. And that's tough. And you got to try to instill that into their brains like day one. Because, you go back to our generation and, I was a small school kid that played football, basketball, baseball. And partly that's why I like the athletic kid. And I let these guys play intramurals because I'm not taking the athleticism out of them. Like, just go play. That's what I would want to do. But I was always outside, playing basketball, pick up football, stickball, wiffle ball, you name it. But it was with the same kids all the time. I played Legion. I didn't play travel ball. They didn't have travel ball then. The only showcase to go to was Watica's in New Jersey. So you didn't have any of the stuff that they have today. Now, this stuff makes it, there's a double-edged sword with it, with travel ball. People always ask me, well, is it good? Is it not? Plain and simple, my kid's going to play travel ball. But there's certain things that lack, like you guys were saying, when you go to Diamond Nation and you pitch 3 innings, the winning aspect of it is forgotten. You're just showcasing. Right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if, your team wins or loses. You're going back to the hotel and you're going swimming and you're hanging out with your dudes. And where when we grew up, everything mattered, from the spring to Legion ball or Connie Mac or whatever you played. Like, you were with the same guys and it mattered. That's just not the case today. It's a different environment and different generations. So, you kind of have to get them back into what we were taught early. We were taught that early, and they have to figure out, like, okay, this is a team and we are here to win. It's not a participation trophy anymore. Like you said, our aspirations are a national championship. So it's either postseason or bust for us. A lot of people don't like to hear that. But it is, in my brain, that's, I want to use baseball as a platform for these student athletes for life and teach them a lot of different lessons. But ultimately, I'm there to win. Graduate guys and win. So they have to figure that part out. And it goes back to the, how tough are they, dealing with failure and fear and all those things that we talk about behind closed doors.
I haven't been at the levels that you've been at. Like, you've won everywhere, and you've coached the highest level of Division III. You've coached Division I. You've coached the best players in the country out at the Cape. I'm always interested to hear about what are some of the common traits that those really good dudes have that you see across all levels. Like, I go back to dudes like Mike Affronti and Kyle Brown and like these really good players. Like, is there a character trait? Is there something about them from a personal perspective, not a physical perspective, that you see across the line for all the good players that you've coached?
Andy Carino played in the bigs.
Yeah. The determination to be good, and be a perfectionist, and just the grind on a daily basis. Obviously now when, I'm talking to scouts and all that stuff, like what's their motor like? I mean, that's the big thing. And are they have attention to detail, or are they, they can't focus for that long? But I think those are the biggest things. Just the determination. And, when I went out to the Cape for the first time, it was a little nerve wracking. Like you say, I always won, and I've been around a Division I, program for a long period of time before I was at Oswego. But it's like, we grew up where the Cape is like the Cape. Like, this is the cream of the crop. And he's like, just coach how you would. And, it's not going to be any different. And it's not. I learned real quick that it is an 18 to 22-year-old kid. And out there, it's 18, 19, 20. I mean, now with the draft where it is and the portal and stuff, now they're older. But when I first started, it's 18, 19, 20. I mean, most of them couldn't even go buy alcohol. So it's not, they do the same stupid things that, my guys do at school. And they're way more talented at that point, obviously. But I think the ones, whether you're at Division III, junior college, Division II, Division I, the guys who are determined and, really have attention to detail and goals of what they want to do, those are the guys that come out on the top.
In some ways, it seems like the obvious answer, but I think that one of the things that, we've all been through it, like you watch freshmen come onto campus and they're all good. Guys who are at William and Mary, guys who played with at Marist, like they're all good players, but who ends up making it? Like, it seems like a simple thing, but it's the kids who are determined. I think there's like a certain level of toughness that comes with that because it's a different world. Like, it's a different level of commitment. What you think you've done in the past when you go in the weight room a couple days a week and you take ground balls and you take batting practice, like that becomes the bare minimum. And then what's the separator for you? And that gets lost in the sauce sometimes. And we've had some talks with guys who are freshmen who call up and check in, and they're talking to her like, man, I didn't know it was going to be like this. Like, you told me, but I didn't expect it. And not that it's a rude awakening, but you're now in a room with a lot more talent, and you're now in a room with some kids who've already figured it out. And if you don't figure it out quick, that certain level of toughness, certain level of attention detail is required just to get in the mix. And then if you want to be good, you got to take that to another level.
100%. And, like you touched on Micah Fronte, he went to AAA. I mean, he's not even close to one of the most talented players I've ever coached, but his determination and toughness was like no other. Like that's what got him there. He did not want to lose. He did not want to be, he was going to play. And I could take Ryan Enos at Oswego, for example, from Oswego, like that's all he wanted to do. I do think there's a correlation as well. Like when you're talking student athletes and, these guys that they're late for class or, they're failing 2 courses, that correlates to baseball as well. 100%. Like if I know a guy is late for class all the time, you bet your ass that he is going to be late at some point for practice or for a game or for the bus. Like that's who he is. And unless he's, skipping class and he's always in our facility working out, which obviously we don't condone and we, type thing, but those guys, there's a direct correlation. Ryan Enos was a 4.0 student every semester, and he was an All-American on the field. They got better and better and better, and then got Division I money, for his last year. So he succeeded everywhere he went, and he even came out to the Cape, after he was at ETSU and played for me, and succeeded there, against some of the best young guys in the country. Why? Because he was older. He's been through the grind, and he just had the determination, he belonged in the Cape, and that's what got him through. But I think that's 100% what is lost in the shuffle. You see so many guys that are perfect game All-Americans coming out of high school, and they fail because they just don't have those tools. The mental piece of it is huge for the guys who can make it.
Yeah, I think
And we talk about making it like it's obviously making it is different at each level you are, but when you're talking elite SEC programs, you're talking, you had Hobbs on that, like those guys they want to be pro players. I mean, not pro play. They want to make the big leagues, not just get drafted. Where our guys, okay, can they make the jump to Division I? Can they get signed type thing? But, I think the ceiling's a little different typically, but, it's all the same. It all correlates back to the same things like determination and the work that you put in. How do you deal with failure? I think that's the biggest thing I see is mentally, like there's so much more. They don't know how to handle failure. They really don't. And that's what you got to try to teach them.
I thought that was one of the hardest things, I think, from a coaching standpoint when I became a head coach. I think it's a little bit easier as an assistant to kind of sit in your ivory tower a little bit when it comes to writing lineups and decide, giving your input on where you think people should play. But that when you're kind of in charge of all of it, I thought that was one of the hardest things, trying to get guys to understand that like failure is okay, but two, like how do we deal with that failure and get tougher because of it and move forward? Because I think, and I do think it's a little bit different. I don't even know if it's really a little bit different, but the high academic world, like you have kids that are super high academic, they're very smart, who have never struggled in school, let alone baseball. And all of a sudden they come in as freshmen and it's like, they got a 2.7 and they can't even see a path for them to get on the field. And, what is that response? And I think sometimes that fall is critical for them to like, I became way more of a like constantly trying to lift them up and be like, hey man, like I know you can't see the forest through the trees right now, but this is what you're going to have to embrace to get through this, and it's going to be okay on the tail end. But you have kids that this is a stupid game. You hit 380. People are like, damn, this kid can roll the pole. Like I want to do what he does. You knock down a 38 on your science test. Like no one's asking you to tutor them in chem because it's like you failed. I think it's hard for people to kind of wrap their head around the fact of like, if I fail 6 out of 10 times, like I'm still pretty good, but this game is way too hard. And I think a lot of times, we as coaches, and I think, as players, you put so much pressure on yourself to be, as perfect as possible, and from an offensive standpoint, it's hard to do. From a defensive standpoint, it's more difficult, but, you have a little bit more wiggle room, I would say. But I do think that in part, like we had, I digress for a second, but, our football coach in 2020 helped me out because I didn't have anyone to help. And he played football and baseball at Davidson with Coach Beretti. Shout out to the Davidson Wildcats and Coach I. But he pulled the guys in after one of the games and he was like, if you guys talk to your friends the way that you talk to yourselves, like, I don't know if some of you would even have any friends. Like the amount of, some of you guys with the negative self-talk you have, like you're college baseball players. Like at the bare minimum, believe that you're good enough to be here. And, I thought that was, obviously, like I didn't hear it obviously because I wasn't in the dugout. He was. But I thought that was an interesting kind of take, obviously, kind of the fake it till you make it, whatever, but I thought that was an interesting way to frame it of like, if you talk to other people the way you talk to yourself, like nobody would like you. So like you shouldn't be shocked that you're not necessarily performing at your best because you don't even believe that you can. And I think trying to get in front of that and teach kind of kids the way of, how do you avoid that? Like, yeah, you're going to struggle, but like, man, it's going to be okay. And I do think that it's gotten a little bit, I noticed I coached for 16 years. Like I noticed it kind of got harder and harder as I got older and stayed in it and did more. So, I kind of digress a little bit there, but
it is. And, social media, just everything today has an impact on it that you and I really didn't understand. Like there's a lot more on their plates. I just, I don't, hopefully no one, takes offense to me, like taking shots at this generation, because it's not at all. There's a lot of factors, man. And they try to live up to those. And there's more and more. I talked to an AD the other day, and a high school AD who was one of my buddies. And I'm like, I'm dealing with this and this and this. And it's a daily, and it's fine. Like, my door is open to handle this. But back in the day, you either figured it out yourself or you became a delinquent. Like, there wasn't a happy medium, and no one was helping you out. It was, you got girlfriend problems, you got school problem, like, figure it out or you're done. Right. And these guys, it's tough for these kids. It really is. And
I think the one thing too, and Andy and I have talked about it, and I think you probably feel the same way, like, because I mean, you're not that much older than Andy and I, but like, even Andy and I, we didn't grow up with social media at all. Like, Facebook came out when we were in college. Like, Twitter came out after we were like gone. Like, these kids have grown up with it.
I mean, I'm glad you're dating us, but
yeah, I am. But like, you know what I mean? Like, but like, we didn't grow up with that, and I think that I think sometimes it's easy, to, I don't want to say blame it, but I feel like it's low hanging fruit when sometimes, like, we don't take into account, as I'm not saying we are not, I'm saying we are. Like, I think it's like we're doing the right thing and trying to take into account all of this stuff and at least try to understand what's going on to figure this part out. I think it's very easy to be like, well, it's Twitter and Instagram and they should just be off it. Like, man, they've grown up with it. Like, you're not just getting rid of that by saying you shouldn't be on it. Like, that's not really going to work.
Right. Like, I think the easiest thing you can correlate is, like, for me, when I'm recruiting Keith Glasser right now, and you choose, whatever, you choose Cortland over us, and you text me, I have a hard time with that. As an old school guy, like, but that's how these kids have been brought up. I mean, I just think, like, I don't even want to respond to this. At least give me a phone call, and I'll say, hey, good luck. If anything changes, give me a shout.
Yeah.
But with a text, I'm just like, whatever. I'm not, but that's me. Like, that's me in my stubborn old school, like, knowing damn well that, okay, that's what we do today in communicating. That's a big thing. That's like, you go to coaching, and how we had you guys played. Did you play for Chef?
Chef left the fall of my freshman year.
I played for Joe at Cortland, and he was tough. Like, Steve was tough. That's how I grew. My high school coaches were tough on you. And I mean, I was a crazy lunatic, before I was married and had kids, now divorced, but like, I was crazy. Like, baseball was the only thing I cared about, and winning. And I've had to really change with the times, as every coach has to change with the times, year after year after year. But I know that I'm going to yell, and I have to get them to understand, like, listen, I'm going to be on you, and it's not because I don't like you. Like, I need you to be good. I'll tell you I love you if 10 minutes later. But so the point is, you gotta really now find the fine line between old school and new school, so to speak. I mean, that's kind of how everybody puts it. Because you have to give them a lot more reassurance, like, I'm going to yell at you, but when you do well, I'm going to pat you on the back and, tell you that was good. It has to happen.
I used to make a joke out of it. Like if I yell at you, like, you have to understand, there's so much, especially in a game setting, like, there's so much going on. I'm over it after those words leave my mouth. Like, and I think sometimes, like, because either they haven't been yelled, and I'm the same, like, we played for Racouille and Heels, and I had tough coaches my whole life. Like, I mean, Heels is just on you. Like, it is what it is. And like, but like, I was okay with that, you know, and I think that's, like, I would have to make jokes. Like, I'm not like, don't go home and like not sleep because you think I'm mad at you. Like, I'm going to sleep well tonight because I've completely forgotten about what I yelled at. Like, not completely, but like, I'm over it. I got it out. I'm done. It's good. Like, we're good. And then when you do something well, I'm going to pat you on the ass and tell you did a great job. But, you know, like, I had to kind of make jokes out of it because sometimes it's like, yo, like, you guys hold on to this a little bit more than like I'm used to. Like, I need you to know, like, I'm not mad at you. I'm not going to hold this against you. I'm not going to hold you out of the leg. I'm not doing anything like that. I'm just, we're competing for something. Like, something's on the line here. I'm going to let you know.
Yeah. And
you got to be able to take coaching as a kid.
Yeah.
You got to be able, and it comes in different forms, but there's not a good coach in college baseball who explains things in a monotone way all the time. Like, sometimes it has to come out with some passion. Sometimes and you have guys who do things different. And I've worked for some guys who I thought were incredible at the consistency at which they showed up. But everybody has their moments where it's, you know, it's like, God damn it. Like, we continue to make, like, and you have these conversations with guys. If you're a player, you can never take that stuff personal. And you need to be willing to be coached. Like, you actually need to embrace that if a coach has given you information, he's probably given it to you for a good reason. When a coach stops talking to you, that's when you got to worry.
Yeah. You know, we talked about determination and being a perfectionist and all that stuff. And those are the guys who really succeed. But the guys who are real with themselves and can look in the mirror and don't have a false sense of reality, because there's too many guys or females, you know, depending on, you know, what sport, but there's just a false sense of reality, and, you know, it's totally different than what practice says or what the stats say. And it's, you know, there's times where I'm just like, how do you come up with that? You know, when you're asking me about playing time, you know, and you can go, we'll take, for instance, for us, you know, because we're indoors for 5 weeks, you know, well, I'm 3 for 10 in my limited at bats. Okay. But you were 1 for 40 in the field house. You know, you're 3 for 10 in limited mop-up duty right now, which I never call it mop-up duty. Like, I want them to play the game. You know, we're never stopping. Like, what we do from an offensive perspective is you're doing the same thing. You know, so if there's any coaches out there, you know, we'll stop bunting and we'll stop stealing, but we're still taking balls in the dirt and we're still sack fly because, again, we live in a stats generation, and those, you know, a sack fly matters to somebody's stats. You know, a dirt ball read that backup guys have been practicing for 10 weeks and they finally get in there. And you want them to do for your program in the future, you have to give them the ability to play and try to win a position. You know, so we'll quit bunting and we'll quit stealing. But, you know, like I tell our guys, like, I'm watching everything. And that includes everything. You know, you miss 50% of your balls in infield practice. And it's like, really? Yeah. I mean, yeah, you don't have any errors in the game, but you got about 5 chances. Like, what about the, you know, 25 errors that you have in practice, you know, type thing. But I just think that, you know, when you break it down from, you know, all aspects of the game, I just think a lot of times the really good guys do not have a false sense of reality at all. And that goes back with dealing with failures and stuff, because they're not, I think those great players look themselves in the mirror and say, I need to do this. This is not very good. Where the average players or below average players pacify, you know, the negatives.
I think the looking yourself in the mirror piece is huge for the development that you have when you get on campus. But I think it's something that's missed a lot of times in the recruiting process, where they don't have enough people. A lot of these kids and you know, families for that matter, a lot of times what happens is that they get people that tell them everything that they want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that honesty has to come and be hurtful. It doesn't. But you need an honest assessment of where you're at so you can make a good decision, so you can implement something to help with change. So, you know, from a coaching perspective, if I'm a player, I want you to be honest with, hey, Andy, if you're going to get in the lineup this year, this is what you need to do, right? You need to be able to do these things offensively because, you know, we don't see you as a top of the lineup guy. So you're going to need to be somebody who's going to keep the line moving, you know, strike zone management. This is how you're going to help us win. Mm-hmm. That's the kind of feedback as a player that you need in order to get better. But from a recruiting perspective, the best thing somebody can do, if they have knowledge of college baseball and how it all works and the level and how good you need to be able to play at Oswego, how good you need to be able to play at a Lemoyne, how good you need to be able to play at a Rutgers, they're all different levels. But these kids need honest information on where they fit so they can make a good decision. And I think that a lot of times that honest assessment is something that me and Keith, we drive home with people that we work with. It's something that we talk about all the time. Like, that's the foundation of it, is that you need to have an understanding of where you are right now so that you can either get to where you want to go or you can make a good decision in what you have in front of you. And I don't think it's any difference when you get on campus. Like, you need to be able to look in the mirror and be like, I'm not as good as that starting shortstop and I want to be the starting shortstop. Well, what the hell do I need to do to get there? Right.
Yeah, and that's 100% correct. I mean, you know, for these guys, I think, you know, so we sent out a thing today to our players for the whole fall, you know, the fall semester. And I got to meet with them on Thursday, Friday, in their fall exit meetings. And it's like, the biggest thing I'm starting with is, what is your identity to this team? You know, and how do you view yourself? And then I'm going to tell you how I view it. But you really have to know who you are. And when you're talking about our program, like, my program's not going to change for Keith Glasser or Andy Kirakides. Like, my program's going to change year to year, but I'm not tailoring it to you guys just because you're tailoring to what I want, or you're going to be gone. Plain and simple. Like, you aren't, like you said earlier, you're not bigger than the team. And this kind of philosophy and this motto and mantra has worked for us. And these are my beliefs. So if you want to do that your way, and which a lot of guys can't figure out real quick, you know, then you're going to have to go somewhere else.
And I don't know if it's that different anywhere else. Like, every coach has a philosophy, every head coach has a culture. Some are stronger than others, right? And they're going to be different. But at the end of the day, it's the player's responsibility to step up to the plate and do what's needed to get on the field. It's not the coach's responsibility to have them fit in. Like, yeah, obviously you want your kids to assimilate into the program and you want them to be a part of the culture. But at the end of the day, the kid has to take ownership of stepping up and doing what's expected of him, because I've never been a part of a program, and I've never known a coach, and obviously me and Keith did this for a long time, that didn't have standards that were really clear cut. Like, and some of them are super simple, like, be on time, wear the right uniform, play hard every day. Those are, if you do those three things, you're going to be all right. Some of it are that simple. Some are a little bit more nuanced, but at the end of the day, the kid, he has to take responsibility. The player has to take some responsibility. He takes some ownership over, well, I need to fit into Coach Lander's program because I want to be a part of this. And the kids who fight that, they have a tough time.
They do. And, you know, for the other I kind of break as I evaluate everything. I feel like, everybody has a culture to some extent. And, I think going back to like, how have you won? You ask me like, or people ask me, how do you win at Oswego? How do you win at Bourne? Or like a lot of different places. And here's what I've learned. There's a lot of guys out there that can recruit, and sit in my position and sell ice to an Eskimo, and be the used car salesman. Those teams are pretty good. They can be pretty good. You recruit, 20 good guys and you can be pretty good, but you're not going to be really good. The second piece of that is you got to have a head coach and a staff in place that is going to develop these guys once they get there. Then you're really good. But then the last piece, you're still not going to win at the end of the season. All right. The last piece of that is you have to have a strong, locked in culture. Those are the teams that win far into the postseason. Those, you can recruit the guys and you can get them good, and you're going to be, there's kind of steps to that, but you got to have if you have the clicks, and you kind of have a suitcase college for what, if it's transfer central, like you can be really good. I just don't believe you can win totally at the end. Can you have transfers? Yeah, 100%. And you have to have them in today's day and age, but they kind of have to be the Band-Aids around, and then they have to come in and fit in. You can't have 30 of them and then think you're going to just establish a culture in 365 days and you're going to go win a national championship. You're not going to do it. It's just not going to happen. So those are the three things that when I'm coaching, I look at, and I feel like we have all three of those. We weren't as successful last year, and to me, it was a bust. But that's on me, like it's fully on me, that I just did not create, we lost so many guys and we lost those leaders that we had for so long, that just went from, the 2015 season when they got it, and then they just gave it to the next guy and next guy. COVID really kind of screwed that up. And these guys got 2 years back. And so they were the staple of my team. And I didn't have to teach these guys after COVID. Like they knew it already. They knew exactly what I expected. They knew what I expected in the weight room, so on and so forth, on the field, how I wanted them to play. And then we lost all those guys, and then the new, the guys that were sitting behind them, even though they were there, they didn't have an identity. And I didn't create it quick enough or at all, really. I mean, for the most part, I kind of let off the gas and kept it off, and that's where I learned, like, okay, I failed. Were we bad? I mean, come on, we were still in the SUNY tournament, but it wasn't up to our standards. And that's on me. Like it starts with me. I failed that right there. But again, that's me looking in the mirror. Like I just didn't do a good job of assessing what we needed to do from a coaching standpoint, and it kind of trickled down.
Yeah, I think that, we talked about it a little while ago. I don't even know if it's going to be spliced in there or not, but when you as the head coach or you as the assistant coach can kind of take that ownership, it does a lot more in your program than I think you kind of realize until you start doing it. When you can legitimately stand in front of your team and be like, hey man, that one's on me. Like, there was a game I distinctly remember. I got the winning run thrown out at third with nobody out. Coaching third as the head coach. Like, and we lost the game. But it did more for me to tell my guys, like, yo, that I screwed that one up. Sorry. Like that one, like I made a mistake. I'm sorry. You know, and I there was not that it was an instant change, but you saw that people were a lot more willing to be like, all right, I screwed up there. Like, no, it was like, we didn't necessarily get rid of my bad, but you know, it was more like, hey, like that one, I got you. Like, okay. You know, but I think it's the same thing. Like when you say you have the conversations about, you know, I've made all my plays in the field. Well, yeah, I've watched you make 30 errors in practice. Like that, I think it's an important thing to reiterate to people who are going through this process and want to play baseball in college. Like you're literally like you have to compete every day, whether it's on the field, in the weight room, wherever. But like you're being evaluated every time you go play baseball, whether it's in practice, whether it's in group stuff, whether it's in a game, whatever it is. Like you're being evaluated. And if I'm watching two shortstops and we're hitting fungos and doing all this stuff, and one of them makes the play 99 times out of 100 and the other one makes it 80 times out of 100, like it doesn't matter. The dude who makes it 90 times out of 100 is going to be in the lineup. Like you might get in there in late games and make the plays, but until you are now 93, 94, 95, 96 times in practice, like there's a huge gap there in my mind because I'm evaluating you every day. And I think that's the other piece, I think, with younger kids and young, like freshmen, when they get into college, realizing like I have like every rep actually does matter. I can't necessarily take those off. And I think when kids really start to grasp that concept, like you can start seeing that jump from he could be good to he's on his way to being good. It's not that he could be. We're working towards it now because he's taking every rep seriously.
Yeah. And, you know, for me, and this is for, you know, whoever out there, the kids, student athletes, you know, we got more days this year to use in Division III baseball. And I elected to keep a bunch of them for now. It just kind of fell that way because I wanted to shut down the pitchers and then ramp them back up and yada, yada, yada. But I've had the ability to work with them the last 2 weeks. Okay. And, you know, now we have we got to be done by Wednesday this week. But for these young guys, it's given me the ability to watch them in the fall in our normal setting. Then it's let me kind of watch them integrate themselves into, okay, well, they're at lift all the time. They're doing this, they're doing that, or vice versa. Like, I never see this kid in here, or you know what I mean? Like, what are they doing when I'm not looking?
Right.
And the gas pedal's not down on them. And then, okay, now some of our freshmen are 15 pounds heavier or, you know, stronger, or they know a little more and they're going through their throwing programs and stuff. So now, okay, we're working on stuff that when we get back, but come Thursday, Friday, I have a little different talk with them comparatively to if I was going to talk to them in, you know, October 15th. When, you know, if we're traditionally done with the fall and I have the end of the year, now it gives me a whole semester to kind of like evaluate these kids. Okay, well, guess what, Keith? You don't go to class? Sorry.
Right.
You know, I have a little better knowledge of what your grades are going to be now than I did in October. You know, how important is this to you? And you're kind of you've showed me for, you know, a lot more weeks and just, you know, the new guys through a 5-week span or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, we had a kid, one of the favorite kids I ever coached, and I probably should have dumped him 20 times in his career. But I left him at home for Florida because he knocked down like a 1.6 the previous fall in the fall semester. And that was my rule. Like, if, you know, academically, if you're not doing well, like you don't get to go to Florida and play. Mm-hmm. And he had a shot to really play. And we ran out of freshmen. And that kid ended up hitting like 350 for the year and never looked back. And it's just kind of one of those things that I think like it's important to at least acknowledge to people like the student aspect of stuff does actually matter in college. Like you can't just no-show class, and you can't just, and to your point, like guys who do well in class, generally it tells you more about what they're going to do baseball wise. And, there is a correlation there. And I think that's, you can't just no-show class and not really care and think that you're just going to show up and play baseball all the time.
Yeah. And I think, I wasn't the greatest student.
Neither was I.
But I think I've been around a lot of people that have figured out how to play college, play college that way and get good grades. But yet they're still doing, but to me, you have figured out that's what you have to do in life too.
Yeah.
It's the guys who don't want to go to class and they're so ignorant, like, oh yeah. And then they get a 2-1 and I'm not doing this. Like, I'm not doing this with you. If you got a 3-2, 3-3, 3-4, like, okay. All right. But I'm not doing it when I got to worry about you being eligible, or got to put you in study hall or find you tutors or, I'm just not doing it. Because you're kind of tearing down the program in that capacity. But I do think it is correlated.
This is one gripe I have with Division III is that it might take me a second to get to my point here, but you're significantly limited with how much face time you get to have with those kids. Mm-hmm. And the whole guise at which Division III does it is that it's the student athlete experience. But I think what it actually does, if you really were invested in the student athlete, structure for many of these kids is what provides them the foundation to be good. And I'm not saying you need to have 40 hours of baseball time. I don't think that that's realistic, but you could go from, Division I's with 20 hours a week for however many weeks, and then they can have supervised lifts and the coaches can be around. Those kids have a much better chance of being successful not because you have your thumb on them all the time, but you see a kid every day and you can look a kid in the face and you can look at Jimmy Smith and be like, I got to talk to that kid because the last couple times I've seen him in here, he didn't have the energy that he usually has. Maybe I need to check in with him. Like, you get an idea of how things are going. And my personal experience, having been in it for 10 years, is during the season is when kids are usually the better students because the structure is so tight. Mm-hmm. You don't have time to mess around because you've got practice you got to be in the training room at 1 to get ready for practice. And then you practice from 2 to 4. And then you're in the training room after. Then you're getting your extra work. Then you're going to study hall, whatever it is. And that structure is actually beneficial. So I like how you extended it out where you use those 2 weeks at the back end because it gave you a longer window to have some visibility into what these kids are doing. So now you have a better feel for them as a coach, but now you also have more information to give these kids in order to help them be successful in the future.
Yeah. And I look at it differently as well with Division III. Like I totally agree with the student athlete experience. The student athlete experience should be Division I, II, and III. I don't know why it's just a Division III model, but like for my guys, I 100% agree. The more they're with me and the more structure they have, the less negative activities they're doing. I'm not saying they're getting rid of all of them, but there's less, 100%. The other thing where I look at it differently is, okay, my athletes are there to play baseball. They're there to get a good education for a very affordable price and to play baseball and hopefully win a national championship. Not for a fraternity I'm the one that recruited them there to play baseball. They want to play baseball. And my biggest thing is, just like if they go to Vanderbilt, they want to play baseball at Vanderbilt. but they're not at, I feel like at times, and the NCAA is getting way better at this because now they're giving us more time and the strength and conditioning. A lot of times money has to do with it, but I feel like you're penalizing the Division III athlete because they're not good enough in our world to get a 50% scholarship, or because let's face it, if I'm just going to use a guy on my team right now, if we'll say Jake Daniluk, or Jake Sanders or Jacob Levine, if they're just all of a sudden offered 50% from Vanderbilt, or they're going, there's not even a question. If they're offered a roster spot or 25% NIL money, like if they're going to get a full scholarship at a Division II school, they're probably going. Like, maybe, I don't know, but I'm just saying, like, I feel like we're penalizing them because they're just not good enough athletes. And Division III said, well, they're there for the holistic and the Division III experience. And I'm like, okay, that might be true. That's good. I mean, I don't really understand it as much as maybe some people do. I mean, I'm a total believer in the community service and, obviously going to class and getting good grades and all that. But what else is there? I don't know. Like, I want to be out in the, we do team impact, and we have a little guy, Cameron, who we just did his signing day, and like we're out in the community and doing all this stuff. We're very visible. Like, what else is part of that? Playing intramural. I let my guys play intramurals. Like, that's fine. They're being athletes, but like, give me the structure, or let me have the time. And I feel like just don't penalize those kids because they're not good enough to get a scholarship. Hopefully that makes sense. And I'm not, like, that's where I think
it does. It makes total sense. Like, you got a bunch of kids who went to Oswego or name whatever other Division III school, and a big reason they're there is to play baseball. And the rules say that you don't get as much time to play baseball with your coach as everybody else does because you don't have an athletic scholarship associated with your school. And that's essentially what it is that, you guys weren't quite good enough out of high school to get an offer from Albany, and you went to Oswego, and now you get to play less baseball because of it. And it's like, that's a big reason why those kids went there. Like, a lot of those kids probably don't go to Oswego if you don't recruit them. Right? That's just the reality of it.
Zero of them.
Yeah. So baseball is the mechanism which got them there, and now they have stronger constraints around how much time they get to spend with the guy who is the reason that they're there. Yeah. I mean, it makes complete sense to me. And it was always, like I said, I'm not saying it should be unlimited. And the reason that they have the hours structure at the Division I level is it's to try to level the playing field, because some schools are at such a big advantage with facilities and weather. Like, it makes 100% sense, but you could use that same model and not deviate from student athlete.
Yeah. And, I just think, like we say, that our motto is the student athlete experience. That should be the motto for all divisions, Division I, II, and III, right? Like, it's all about, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't have a job without student athletes. Nobody else, Nick Saban doesn't have without student athletes. Like, it should be the student athlete experience at all levels. And I'm not saying baseball at Oswego is bigger than the school or Division III. Not like, I'm just like, I feel like good programs, those student athletes, whether it's baseball or it could be volleyball, they want to play that sport. You know how many hours my guys are in there, like unsupervised, and I'm not saying unsupervised like from the school perspective, but like me not like doing the wrong things, or, think about the toll that has on a pitcher. Like when they're doing throwing programs and we don't have the ability to watch them do it. Like they're just, and we have all this technology, like they're going to do it. That's my point. Like, why would you take that away from us to be there with them?
Yeah, I hated that. I've just flat out. I mean, it's especially I think even more so at the Division III level. Like they're at your school, A, because you recruited them, but B, like they want to play the sport it is that they're playing. Whether it's baseball here because this is what we talk about. But the kids at Oswego playing hoops are there because they were recruited to play hoops at Oswego. Like they want to go there and they want to be in an open gym. They want to like allow the coaches to do a little bit more with them so that their experience. And how many times you sit in staff meetings and talk about the student athlete experience? Like I bet you can enrich it if you let us, structure it and be around them a little bit more. And I think that's, that right there is why I think there's the myth around the idea that Division III is just kind of like 13th grade and anybody can go play and just walk on and it is what it is. Like it's a little unstructured because there is not a lot of, not that there isn't structure. I'm not saying that, but like it's a lot less than Division I and II. So I think people view it through that lens of like, well, I mean, it's not 1 and 2, so I can probably play. And then, they get pissed when they show up and they try out and it's like you can't play Division III baseball. Like you gotta be good. And that's, they can't kind of wrap their head around that.
And I think it's just there's such a big discrepancy between the bottom and the top in Division III.
Yeah.
There's so many schools.
Yep.
I mean, and so the despair, it's crazy. You look at some schools in New York and it's like, okay, these are top level schools and these are the bottom feeders. Like, what do they really do at those schools? I don't know.
Right.
I just feel like, when you're using sports as a platform for these student athletes, you need to let us use it, to the fullest extent, because at the end of the day, when you go out and get a business job, they want athletes.
Mm-hmm.
They want athletes. And you go, and you go to be an accountant or, business administrator, market. They know they know teamwork. They know dedication. They know being on time. Like they have all those traits, leadership. So I don't know. It's just, I agree with the model a little bit. I just don't necessarily agree with it just at the Division III level and how they kind of strap you a little.
Yeah. No, I couldn't agree more. I felt the same way for the 10 years that I was there. We don't want to take up too much of your time here, but we appreciate everything you've done. What advice would you give a family or a kid who's going through the recruiting process right now, to try to find the right fit for them athletically and academically?
First I would say you really have to sit back, and for the parents, I would say it's the kid's decision, with you educating them and helping them out. But ultimately it's their decision and they got to go by their gut. Again, you got to understand and look yourself in the mirror and be real with yourself, and where you're at that time. That doesn't mean you're always going to be at that point. Especially with the transfer portal today, I know, to me, I truly think a 1, a 2, and a 3 next to your name or next to the school doesn't make a difference in anything. I feel like you have to, when you sit down and you say, what is important to me? Because I can sit here and say, you know what, Keith, you're my recruit, X, Y, and Z. But what I say isn't always, it's not right or wrong. But you have to go with, as a student athlete and a recruitable athlete, you have to go with what is important to you. Do I look myself in the mirror and say, okay, I'm not quite good enough to be at Oswego yet, but if I get this chance, I'm going to make it happen. And I don't know if I'm going to sit for a year. Okay. I don't know if I'm going to sit for 2 years. I don't know if I'm going to start when I go in there right away. But I'm willing to take that bet, and I'm going to do that. Or, you know what, I'm just going to go to this school because I know I'm going to play right away, but I might not necessarily win. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just whatever's important to you and making the decision. You know, but that's the biggest thing. You know, you really got to figure that out and just go with your gut. The 1, 2, and 3 does, you know, I always say your experience at that institution is what's going to create, you know, it's either going to be good or bad. You know, I went to Cortland, you guys went to Marist. You know, out of high school, I got recruited by some Division 1s, Division 2s, and Division 3. And ultimately, I went to school because of Steve Owens. I went to Cortland because of Steve Owens, nothing else. You know, and I try to educate my recruits on that. Like, I made a great choice. I would never change it for the world. I wouldn't take any of the Division 1 offer. Like, I had an awesome experience. But I didn't go there for the education. Like, that just fell in my lap. You know, I got lucky. I just went there because of the coach. I kind of tell these guys, you know, the experience is what's going to make it for you. And winning obviously helps. But I say, you know, you have to go to a school that academically fits. That's where you first and foremost have to start. You know, is what the money I'm going to put in, return on investment, you know, like, what's the education going to be? What am I getting out of it? It has my major. I don't have to go, you know, Tommy boy 8 years to go to school, type thing, you know. And then it's really like, and Glass, you'll know this because it's the coach and the players, because ultimately that's who you're around for 4 years or 5 years. And, you know, I could have went to Cortland and been like, okay, I'm going there strictly because of Steve Owens. And then if they didn't have my major, I mean, I kind of narrowed it down with the schools, but at that point, I really didn't care. I was a 17-year-old, you know, know nothing other than I wanted to go play baseball. Yeah. It might not have had my major. You know, I wasn't paying a lot of money to go to the state school. So I went into phys ed at the start, and then I got out of it, but because I was like, oh, well, whatever, I'll just go into phys ed. Like, Cortland's good at phys ed. And ultimately I was a teacher, but not in phys ed. But I could have went there and been like, those players, I don't fit. I'm going to go there because of Steve Owens. And then the players I don't get along with. You know, it's like private school, public school. I have different, you know, say you're at RPI, my student athletes are different than yours. Like, it is what it is. You know, so if you don't fit into those three things, then that's probably not a good fit. You know, you got to look at all those things. And I would say the grass isn't always greener on the other side. You know, if you feel it in your gut, take it. You know, I equate it to us as coaches. And, you know, when you're coaching, you see the guys that are out there, you know, and they're at every single showcase, every single one. and they got 1,000 notes, and they're like, Andy Kirakides, pretty good. We might want to offer this kid, or we'll see. Keith Glasser, same thing. But then they don't pull the trigger on you two. Well, there's a showcase next week, and then there's another showcase, and then you have all these guys, and then Andy Kirakides is gone, and Keith Glasser's gone, and now you're stuck because you're indecisive. And instead of just saying, you know what, I'm going to go after Keith Glasser, I'm going to commit him, and then I'm going to make him better, and I'm going to live with that. I think that's where a lot of coaches get into trouble. Where the grass, you think it's great. I'm going to miss out on this guy. No, well, no, don't miss out on the first guy.
Yep.
And then my philosophy is, if the next guy is good, just go get him too. Figure it out.
Well, it's interesting because, and I learned this a little bit later in my coaching career, but if you want to find a flaw with somebody, and this goes for schools, right? When you're going through the process, if you want to find a reason to not like somebody, it's easy.
100%.
It's easy. And if I was going to give a piece of advice to a young coach, is that if you start with the things a kid can't do, you need to reverse field and start thinking about, what can a kid do that helps me win? What can I improve, and what are his deficiencies? Because at the end of the day, unless you're coaching at Arkansas or Wake Forest, you're getting kids that got flaws. So you're not getting the sick. You're not getting the, if you're at Marist, you're not getting the 6'3", 210-pound center fielder who runs 6'5", hits for power and average. Like, something's wrong with that kid from a baseball perspective, and you kind of got to live with it. So like you got to have some conviction in what you're looking with, and you're not. To high school kids who are going through this process, you're not going to find the perfect school.
No.
And if you can always nitpick at something, well, it's a little bit far from home, or the school's not as big as I'd want it to be. You need to focus on the things that are really impactful in your life, the people that you're going to be around, coaching staff, the culture within that program, because you're going to need to figure out how to be a part of that. And are you going to get the degree that you're looking for? Not necessarily in that order, but for high school players, like I think that's a really huge piece of the puzzle, is that if you have a feeling like that's the right place, it probably is. Probably is.
Yeah. And, you take Steve Owens, for example, and, and this is how I used baseball at Cortland. Like, he was my coach when I was there, and we didn't always see eye to eye. He was tough. And then he went from my coach, and I went and coached with him for 9 years, and he was my mentor, and for a long period of time. Now, I coach some of his guys, and hopefully I'll be able to, coach with him again. But now we're best friends. It went from me as his player to a mentor to now a best friend, and I kind of use that because that's how I've used baseball and relationships and those experiences to help me out.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's not the case for everybody, but I mean, Heels and I never saw, we didn't see eye to eye all the time, but when I got into coaching and he was still in coaching, even when he got out, like, I would lean on him and ask him questions about stuff. And, he was a mentor of mine. And I'm grateful that I had that opportunity. Like, I didn't have the choice to go play for him because I was already there when he showed up. But we had a phenomenal, he helped me get my first job. He helped me get my second job. Like, he's helped me, too many times that that I'm not going to be able to give back to him, but I'm grateful for that. I'm not sitting in this position without him, and I'm super grateful for that experience, but for that relationship. And it doesn't happen without baseball.
How many young?
I know you're not, but thanks, Heels.
How many young coaches listen to this?
I mean, I have a decent amount who text me.
I would say to them, and this is, this is one trait. I got a very type A personality at times, especially when I'm coaching, but, you know, I would sit back with Coach O and, you know, he would ask me a question, you know, what do you want? He would always ask me to line up. We would always write it down, and then it would be different, you know, come game time tomorrow. Or, you know, you want to take this guy out or you want to leave him in? Let's leave him in. And 20 seconds later, he's on the field taking him out. And I'd be like, why in the hell are you even asking me? But, you know, to those young coaches out there, I do the same thing now. And because, number one, I value your opinions, it makes me think through my decisions, especially at night, like when you're talking lineup. It has nothing to do with, you know, Keith Glasser puts these 9 out there and I'm just going to switch it because I can. But, you know, even in the Cape, you know, I talked to Salty Lamacchia. He's like, why are you even asking me to line up? You're just going to change it. Because I value it and respect it. And it helps me come to the conclusion that I want to come to, you know, all the time and kind of think everything through. So, you know, I think to a young coach, like, I would take that as a compliment and learning from a head coach. Because ultimately, you know, number one, they're trying to groom you, but number two, they're valuing your opinion, whether you look at it the other way, but that's not so. If they didn't care about your opinion, they would never ask.
Yep. I thought, you know, we had Rossi on and we've had a bunch of people who coached with him. You know, it's a very similar experience, right? And I think, you know, and I played against Coach Owens and I know him a little bit, not nearly as well as you do, like, but I think some of the guys, and I think Coach Owens is one of the best coaches in college baseball, hands down. Mm-hmm. You know, but I think that those guys that are really, really good at their jobs and they do a really good job of being able to coach the coaches just as much as they do their kids.
Yeah,
and I think it takes a special kind of coach to be able to do that. And I think we, you know, when you're in this as long as you are, and as long as you were, and Andy and I, like, you try to do that to the guys that, you know, I try to do with my assistants, but, like, you know, I think it takes time to be able to understand that and do that. But, like, to your point, like, it's kind of like the kids. Like, if you stop talking to them, you're not necessarily like you're not giving up on your assistants, but you don't really you're not really working with their opinions anymore. Like, you want to work through that stuff because the more that you can talk it through, the more it works better. But I think those guys that are really, really good, that really separates themselves, are the guys that can get their assistants better. And I think that's like, those are the guys that I think are awesome in this game.
Yeah, and the other thing I would say to a young coach is don't be a yes man. Mm-hmm. You know, that's like the last thing I want.
Yep.
Because, you know, I come off as a type A personality and very but at the end of the day, I want somebody to argue with me, not because 10 minutes later we're good. Mm-hmm. But I want them to, okay, if you're going to tell me this, why? And I'm going to argue, because at the end of the day, I'm not always right. I might be like, shit, Glass was right on that one. You know, it doesn't make a staff or a head coach better when everybody's a yes person on that. Like, you need to state your opinions and then respect whatever opinion, you know, the head coach is going with. But I think to help the whole program out and to help the head coach, I think most head coaches would say the same thing I do. You can't have too many yes men.
Nope.
Well said. Well, Coach, really appreciate you coming on, man. That was good conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Glad Keith was able to twist your arm to give us a few minutes. So Well,
My pleasure.
yeah, I can't thank you enough. Looking forward to getting this one out onto the interwebs for everybody to listen to in a couple weeks. So thank you again. Keith, you got anything?
No, thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Alice.
It's always great talking to you.
If we don't talk, best of luck this spring. Hope the Lakers can find their way back to the postseason. Make a little ruckus in there.
We're gonna be all right. We'll be good.
Good. All right. Well, thanks again. Appreciate it, and we'll catch up soon.
Okay. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott.
Let me know.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. Coach Landers just went on with his evening. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Go ahead and smash that thing. As Coach Glasser would say, follow us on Twitter and Instagram at EMD Baseball. And if you want to learn more about what we do to help families, check out the new online academy, which is chock full of information, not only from us too, but a lot of the wonderful people that we've got a chance to work with and know throughout the baseball industry. Go ahead and check that out on emdbaseball.com. Until next week, thanks for listening.